What's up guys? Today we're working on the Z because we've got some improvements to make before the next round of hot pit. Now before the next round of hot pit, we're actually going to be doing a team practice day at Willow Springs. That'll probably be in the next video, so I'm trying to work on getting this thing ready so we can actually test out these improvements. Now nothing I'm doing is going to be a huge drastic change. It's all just a lot of little things that I want to improve on, some things we learned at hot pit, and just some areas that I think we can make some improvements on. So let's get into it. First improvement is going to be in the trunk. Actually, there's a few things that are going to happen in here. Biggest one being a new battery, because we are not going to be push starting this thing on the grid ever again. But I also want to change how the nitrous is mounted. I don't remember if I talked about this in the hot pit video or not, but I want to switch the nitrous bottle to be mounted vertically so we have a better chance of using all the nitrous in the bottle. That's how a lot of teams do it. I was seeing that in most of the cars that ran nitrous, and I figured, well, we should be able to figure out how to mount this thing vertically one way or another. But in order to make some room for that, we have to cut some stuff out, which is honestly something I've been dying to do since we put the cage in this thing. So let's get out my favorite tool, the Sawzall, and start doing some weight reduction. A good look at how the trunk looks right now. All right, making some progress. In case you were curious what it looks like in there. Still gonna clean that up and like make it look nice, but now we've got some room to work. Gotta do the same with the other side. All right, rough cuts are done. Actually was a bit easier than I thought. I thought there was gonna be a lot more spot welds in there, but the way I cut it really just made my job a whole lot easier. And I think it's gonna clean up really good. Let me show you some of the details, because I thought about this for a little while, and I think this is the best and probably easiest way to do it if you are gonna cut this big strut bar out. Now, like I said, I still have to clean it up, but this piece that comes up into this one, like this piece is separate. This is where it ends. So I just followed that line, cut it right across there, and then just kind of brought it down. And the piece that surrounded this was all just attached to the strut bar. So after I cut this on these three sides, it really just pulled right out. That gives me full access to the top of the shock so I can adjust dampening a lot easier. And you're keeping this, which I think adds a bit of structural strength, and obviously this does. And there's like more layers that kind of go down into that on the back side of the shock tower. So I felt like that was important to keep. Obviously still have a good bit of cleanup to do. I want this to look nice. I don't want any sharp edges. So if I am adjusting the shocks or something, nobody's getting cut. And I'd also like to do a little bit of stitch welding just to kind of strengthen up the stuff that I did cut out, because now there's some open seams there that I just want to weld on up. So still a bit of work to do, but we are moving in the right direction. And like I said, this now gives us a whole lot more room in here, so we can play around with where we're going to mount that nitrous bottle. Maybe we can move the battery around. And it also opens up a lot of future options if I want to do a rear firewall on this thing and eventually do a tube rear. And that's a whole nother rabbit hole we haven't got into yet, but moving in the right direction. This little bracket right here has bothered me for so long. There's one on each side of the strut tower. So it went right here. You can see on the other side. This one's mangled because I tried to remove this thing a long time ago when I first got the cage in, and I just never got around to finishing it because it's such a pain. It's held in with like 4 or 5 spot welds on one side and then actual welds on the other side, so I cut through all that and finally got it out. Obviously I still have to do the other side of the car, but a win's a win. All right, I'm super happy with how this is turning out. Finally got all these little brackets off the back of the strut towers here. Obviously got the strut tower bar out. Got everything cleaned up. There's no sharp edges. I think it looks really good. Now don't mind how messy it is. I still have to vacuum everything out, but check that out. Still got to weld that too. That was one of the spot welds. But there was a bracket here. There was a bracket here. There was that really big bracket I talked about here. All of that's gone. Everything looks clean. This little guy's here, like I said, no sharp edges. So if someone's got to do a quick shock adjustment, jump in there, you're good. Same on the other side. Before I vacuum this mess out, I'm going to clean the seam sealer out here because I want to stitch weld this, and maybe a few other little areas just to kind of add some strength from what I cut out. Plus it doesn't really look like there's a ton in there. There's a couple spot welds for where the top of the strut tower is, but easy added strength would be stitch welding this. So I'm going to clean the seam sealer out. That way it'll be ready for that when I can get around to welding it. Fastest way to remove seam sealer, a torch. After you torch it, come in there with a wire brush on a drill. Perfect, nicely prepped material, super easy to weld stitch weld on, and we didn't take any extra material off. If I had used a grinder, flap disc, something like that, you would have ground this metal down, potentially this metal down, and this is thin sheet metal, so you really don't want to grind any of this down. You don't want to lose this material because that's what you're welding to. So I found that a torch and a wire wheel is the fastest, easiest, and best way to get that stuff out of here, and now we've got a real nice place to stitch weld. Okay, I may have gotten a little carried away, but I figured while I was back here, I might as well tackle the sound deadening that's been living on these wheel wells for so long. This is the only sound deadening left in the car, and well, it's not left there anymore. Obviously, I still have to clean it all. I can make it look a whole lot nicer than that, but as you may have seen, the best way to get it out is with a torch and a scraper. For some reason, this sound deadening specifically will not come out with dry ice or anything else I tried, except fire. Now I'm going to throw all that sound deadening and the sheet metal we cut out into a box and see how much weight we saved. I'm not expecting to save a lot. That wasn't the main goal with taking all this stuff out, but it is going to be a byproduct and I'm curious. All right, check it out. I threw everything in a box. This little plastic box weighs 3 pounds. I weighed it off camera. 14.6 minus the 3 pounds the box weighs, we're at 11.5 pounds. Like I said, that wasn't the reason I did all that, but hey, 11 pounds is 11 pounds. A little bit less weight on this thing. There's definitely more weight reduction I want to do, but I definitely like chasing a pound here and a pound there, especially if it's just a byproduct of something else I'm doing. Now that we've got so much extra space back there, I can start figuring out where I want to mount the nitrous bottle. So with all this extra space, it's time to figure out where we're going to put the nitrous bottle. Now the point of all this was to be able to mount the nitrous bottle vertically, but we do still have some limiting factors there. So as you can see, I just set the bottle in the trunk. Now if we leave it there, you'll see the top of the nozzle just barely clears this. I mean, like, it would be really close to either the glass or this plastic trim, and that's if I have it all the way on the floor there. If I wanted to mount it a little higher, like let's say up in that corner, I could mount it off the cage. That would be real nice. Now it's sitting much higher than the trunk flange. Now yeah, I can still play around with where that bottle is going to be. I could probably find the right spot, kind of mix between everything, but I want my options to be as open as possible, and this gives us another opportunity to save a bit of weight. Let me show you exactly what I'm talking about. So as you can see, we have an extra hatch. I've had this thing laying around for a long time because I've wanted to do exactly this. If you've been following for a long time, you'll know I broke the glass on this thing in Drift Week about a year ago, and it's finally time we put this to use. As you can see, there's no glass in it already. That's where this clip came from. Let's get some weight taken out of this thing. But before I kicked the glass out, I did weigh it. So stock with glass in it, this thing weighs 66.5 pounds. That is crazy. I cannot believe how heavy this is. So obviously we got the glass out. I still have some cleaning up to do, but there's also a bunch of extra metal and bracing and stuff in there. We're gonna try and get this thing as light as we possibly can. All right, we got the scale out. We're gonna put this thing on the scale with just the glass removed. 51.5. All right, so just by removing the glass, we went from 66.5 to 51.5, so 15 pounds. But I'm convinced there is still a lot more weight in this thing, so let's get serious about it. For starters, we don't need any wiring in here. Let's get all this out. We also don't need this third brake light. Been cutting this Z-hatch up. Finally got one layer of sheet metal out of this thing. There's so much metal in here. It's no wonder it's so heavy. Now we got to come up with an actual plan of attack to get some real weight out of this thing. All right, I've still got a bunch more work to do on this thing to get it ready for the track this weekend. So I'm going to put a pause on the hatch, but I wanted to at least show you guys where I'm finishing and how much this thing weighs as of right now. There's definitely still more weight I can take out, but like I said, we've got bigger fish to fry right now, so we'll get back on this a bit later. This is where we're at right now. Finally down to one layer of metal. So this is the, well, this is some like weird sound netting stuff, but this is the outer skin, the one you actually see on the car. This is the one underneath it, and then there was another one underneath that, and then there was even more over there. All this stuff was like glue that held in the brackets, that held in the latch that like opens and closes it. So we'll be putting pins in this thing. Like I said, there's still more weight I can cut out, but we're getting somewhere. Let's see how much this thing weighs now. 36.8 pounds. Now when we started, it weighed 66.5. We're down to 36.8, so just about 30 pounds off this thing. Now keep in mind, this hatch was not completely stock when I weighed it. It didn't have the windshield wiper motor or anything related to that, and it didn't have the big weight that's in the hatch. There's literally like a piece of steel block that's bolted to the back of the hatch. I don't know if it's for like vibrations or sounds or just to make the hatch weigh more so it opens smoothly. I don't know, but without those two things. So I think if I had both in there, the stock hatch would be closer to 70 pounds. But 36 for now, we're definitely moving in the right direction, but I really want to get this thing even lighter. That'll have to be in a future video though. Like I said, we got some work to do.
Tomorrow.
What are you working on there, Nate?
Removing the godforsaken ABS pump.
Another one of the improvements on the agenda for the Z, we're going to be putting a proportioning valve in the brakes to make left foot braking easier. And while we're in there messing with all the brake lines, figure might as well delete the ABS module pump thing. Some dead weight, some extra clutter. So we're redoing some lines now. Going to get that prop valve in there. It should have the brakes feeling a whole lot better. If you have a Z and you're interested in doing some stuff like this, try to document it so maybe you can follow along. Got that big old ABS pump out of there. Now we're just working on routing the lines so we can get this valve in there. Should be able to fine tune the brakes a lot easier with this. ABS pump and bracket, almost 5 pounds of weight savings. Nice.
This is kind of really the only way you should be doing it. Just a typical thumb cutter. The smallest one, the better, so you can get these tight areas. So you do a rotation, twist it.
All right, we officially have all the brake lines out of the car. Well, not all of them, but almost. And working on making new brake lines. So the rear is dual from the back all the way to that ABS thing we removed. But there is a little junction here. So we're gonna Y that and then run a single line up over there to the new prop valve. And from there it'll go into the master. What is this fancy contraption you have?
So the fancy flaring tool. It can flare standard brake lines and AM fittings.
Oh.
So you want to make sure you put your brake fitting first, just as a out of habit. And then you put your line in the jaws, clamp it down. And then I'm going to spray a little bit. Now I don't know if this is going to work without a table vise. Yeah, should fit. So these are going to be double flares. So you do one of that, and then you switch it to the next flare. It's easier with the actual table vise clamped in. So that's it.
Nice. Perfect fit.
Yeah.
All right, it's been a few hours, but we got the brake lines wrapped up. Super excited with how this turned out. Disclaimer, the brake line, I ordered regular copper nickel line on Amazon, and it just wasn't up to par. Every time we put it in the flare tool, it would just get crushed. Went down to the parts store, bought a roll. It was quite a bit more expensive, but it worked, had no issues, and now we have brake lines. So let me explain the routing to you. And like I said, if you're doing something like this on your Z or your car, hopefully it'll help. So starting under the car, this is the rear brake lines. They came up and they actually ran two from here all the way to the ABS pump. So we teed them two into one, and then we're running one line for the rear now. It comes up, it runs behind the fake firewall thingy over to here. It goes into our proportioning valve. And then from that, it goes to the master. Now the fronts are really simple. It goes from the master to that T down there, and then from the T it just goes one to the right side of the car and one to the left side of the car. And you can see, just poke them through the factory little grommet area, right back to the factory position lines, and we're good. Now, why did we do all this? Aside from saving the whole 5 pounds we got out of the ABS pump module thing, the main reason was for that proportioning valve I showed you. Now what that does is it changes the brake bias front to rear. So you can adjust that little knob, and it's going to change how much pressure is going to the rear brakes, which means I can take some of the load off the rear brake so that when I'm drifting on throttle and I go to left foot brake, there's nothing taking power from the rear wheels, or there's a lot less because there's a lot less pressure on the rear brakes, which is going to make the front brakes work better. It's going to make the car feel better, and it's going to make it perform better. Plus, it's just one more added way to really fine tune the car setup and get this thing as good as it can be. Another thing I haven't quite finished up, but I figured I'd at least show you, is the nitrous mount. You guys know I talked about mounting this thing vertically. So you can see I've got a plate there. I just need to weld it in. And then we've got our same strap that we've been using. I haven't welded that, but I'm just gonna tack weld it to the shock tower here. That's gonna sit nice, and it should work a whole lot better being mounted vertically. I've still got some work to do. I'm gonna be testing this thing out this weekend, so I wanna get everything wrapped up. That way we can go test all these new changes and make sure they work, and hopefully it was all worth it. Also, just wanna give a massive thank you to Nate. He's one of the guys that's been on our crew for Hot Pit. He's super helpful, very knowledgeable, and it was his idea to put a proportioning valve in this thing because he saw how I was struggling with left foot braking. And he really was the one who kind of oversaw all this. He's done this to his car. He knows a lot more than I do, especially when it comes to making brake lines from scratch. So thanks, Nate. I really appreciate the help, and I can't wait to see the difference in how this thing drives.
3 days later.
As you can see, we've got the Z back on the ground, which means all the brakes are bled. Thanks to my girlfriend Rachel. She was in the car pumping that thing a million times while I went around to each corner and bled them all. If you bled brakes the old school way, you know you can't do it alone. But the brakes are feeling good. There are no leaks in any of the fittings we did, so I think we're dialed. I'm sure it'll take some fine tuning at the track this weekend, but all things are looking good so far. Also figured I'd show you the nitrous mounting system. It is all wrapped up. So we're not going to be running a hatch this weekend because that one over there, I haven't finished doing my weight reduction on yet. But as you can see, we've got the nitrous bottle mounted vertically. Ended up adding the second strap there just because it was not as secure as I liked, so now it's real solid in there. I got the line held in with a little P-clamp there on a factory mount. Still have to put the battery in, but I think we're looking good. This thing will be cool once I get the hatch back on. I'm probably going to do like half of a Lexan window and then just leave the back open, especially once this thing gets cut out and real race car stuff, but we're not quite there yet. That's going to be a wrap on this one. I know it was kind of all over the place doing a bunch of little things here and there, but all the little things add up, especially when we're in a field as competitive as Hot Pit, and even more so when we're in a car that's not as competitive as it could be. I know we don't really have the power right now, but I'm trying to do everything I can with the chassis and the setup and everything else to make this car as competitive as possible. And in the not so distant future, we may be getting a new power plant for this thing. So make sure you're subscribed because there is a lot to come. I'm working on a lot behind the scenes. Like I said, it may not happen in the next week or two, but we've got something cool in the works. But I don't want to spoil too much. So we're going to wrap this one up here. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. And of course, I'll catch you in the next one.